Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to another Beyond the Benefits podcast episode. I'm your host, Mark DeFee, and my co-host, Zoe Cobran, is actually traveling the world right now, so she can't be with us today. But luckily, we have Megan Friedman stepping in for her, and Megan is the newest member of our sales team. So welcome, Megan. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm excited about our conversation, excited for you to have joined the team. So I think probably the best place to start is just telling our listeners a little bit about yourself, your history, and what you do here at CCA.
Thanks, Mark. That sounds great. So I am part of the CCA team. I've been with CCA for 3 years, though new in my role as Vice President of Business Development, supporting the EAP side. And my background is my education is actually in psychology, though I did not actually continue with that education and become a practicing psychologist. And so I've always been in sales, and I've also have a background of supporting healthcare professionals in the continuing education space. And when I began at CCA, I was doing a lot of work in the healthcare space, and now I'm really excited to move into supporting EAP. And actually, sort of an interesting anecdote, the way I learned about CCA was during COVID. I was doing some work around supporting healthcare professionals' mental health,
Hmm.
and someone reached out that their colleague had died by suicide, and they were struggling, and they were unable to reach their EAP.
Oh,
And yeah, and they did not have access to any kind of support, and they were in extreme distress. And through a friend of mine, I learned about CCA, and I reached out, and they were able to get connected to services quickly, even though they were not even part of the CCA network.
wow, that is cool to hear. One, that's your first experience, but CCA being able to step up and CCA didn't know you very well, obviously didn't know this healthcare professional, but the willingness to jump in there, that's great to hear. That's a fun intro to EAP.
Yeah. Yeah.
You did mention one, I guess, your first experience accessing services, EAP services, at another EAP previously, and that one went a different route. Why don't you tell people about that experience when you first tried to access EAP for yourself and your family?
Yeah, that's right. So it didn't go as smoothly as I'd hoped it would. So I have a special needs child, and he we needed counseling for him. And I learned of my EAP. I was really excited to use it and to receive these services. And when I called in, I was transferred from one automated system to the next, continued giving all of my information, and then speaking to one person, a customer service rep, not a clinician, repeating the information. And this whole call probably took an hour of my time.
Wow.
Um, and it was incredibly frustrating because in this moment, where I'm dealing with a lot, working mom and, a child that's struggling. And I essentially almost gave up on the journey.
Mm.
Then finally, when I did connect with someone who was able to give me information, they just provided essentially a code and a list of providers. And that list, they sent via email, and I then started reaching out to providers, and not a single one had availability. Not a single one was within my insurance network, so that if I wanted to continue services for my son, I was able to. And so it was completely a waste of time. And I didn't end up getting what I needed from it. And it was really disappointing and really frustrating when, initially I was so excited that I had this access to this service. And in the end, it was a failure.
Yeah, and God, I hate to hear that, and I'm sorry that was your experience. I'm curious, how many days did it take from when you first engaged your EAP until finding out none of these providers were going to work for you?
You know, they provided the list within 24 hours or so, but I had to do all of the navigating myself.
Yeah.
So it took additional hours of my time to make all of these calls. Most of the providers did not call me back or were not even working anymore, um, or the phone numbers were wrong. And so, I assumed after perhaps like a week or so of not hearing back, no one having availability, that it just wasn't, it was moot. It was not going to
Mm.
happen.
So you're spending hours doing this, taking, a week plus to get it the answer of this isn't going to work for you. Your frustration is building through all this, and your child isn't getting the support they need.
Right. Right.
So, it's unfortunate because this story is so common within the EAP field. It sounds like though, uh, it has driven you to make sure that EAP services are delivered correctly.
Right.
What do you see as the difference between that experience versus how CCA would handle a member like that?
Well, it's funny that you asked that, Mark, because recently I've done a little bit of secret shopping,
Oh,
because
nice.
yeah, I wanted to understand really how CCA does it differently. There's one thing of, what we say internally, and
Mhm.
there's another thing to actually go through the journey yourself. And so I chose to navigate it myself, without, the intake counselor on the other end knowing that I was a CCA employee. So, I went through the member journey and it was really, really simple. Yeah. I can't the journey before that with the other EAP was so cumbersome and so difficult. And it really could not have been simpler. When I called in, I was able to connect with an actual counselor. Um, I don't know what their level was, but I know master's level or above. And I gave the intake counselor the criteria that I was looking for the provider. We need specific times because my child is in school. Um, I would like it to be in person because, especially for a child, that was, something that I thought would be better for him. And not only did they find me someone within 24 hours, they actually booked the appointment for me.
Hmm.
And it could not have been a more different experience. And it was night and day, and it was really simple. And that person was in my the provider they found for me was in my insurance network, and so we were able to continue on after the EAP sessions, and we were able to continue with counseling.
Uh, that's so cool because what I heard was something that took you hours and hours and a week plus to finally find out it's not going to work. On the flip side, it took CCA about 24 hours to find a solution for you.
Yeah. I mean, not only find a solution, but it was exactly what I was looking for, meet all of the criteria that I needed to support my son. So, and then in addition to that, I had some other challenges. So my father is elderly, and I was navigating sort of senior care for
Hmm.
him.
Yeah.
And so, they were able to helped me identify an assisted living facility for him, and he's actually living there now, and it's been really extremely helpful. But had I have spent all of that time researching senior care facilities, and assisted living facilities, that would have taken more time out of my day, and I do not have the time
Yeah.
to dedicate to that.
Yeah, and that's another key piece, those work-life services, just giving people time back in their day to focus on other matters, I think is crucial. And uh, regarding finding a provider for you, uh, I've spent 20 years in the EAP field, and I kind of grew up, I like to say, on the operations side. And I didn't, because of the EAPs that I worked at, I didn't know anything different. I just assumed every EAP gave a provider list to people and put the onus on them and the legwork on them to find a provider, and then to call us back and tell us that first appointment date so we can fax authorization paperwork. Like, I just kind of thought that's how every EAP did it. And then finding out that for 40 years, CCA has been finding appointments for people, not just providers, but actually, finding appointments. And that's been their standard since their inception. It just blew me away. And then, like you mentioned, uh, you spoke with a clinician from the beginning. That clinical only answer model is expensive because you're paying clinicians to do any type of call that comes CCA's way. But it's those details that make all the difference of whether or not someone continues. And I think people would be pretty shocked if they knew EAPs just gave provider lists and told people best of luck. Uh,
Right.
I imagine as an outsider, that wasn't your expectation.
Right. No, it wasn't. And I think back to my that first experience with EAP, and I think about if I was in emotional distress, and let's say, I was maybe even actively suicidal, ho that journey would have been very different. That experience, I probably would have hung up. Um, and I may have not connected with someone. It took, so many minutes, probably 45 minutes to actually speak with a live person. And, if I was in active distress, that would have been really, really disastrous.
Yeah. Yeah. And having someone to, quote unquote, hold your hand, walk beside
Yeah.
you through the process, and check in, because this is another cool piece about CCA. Once you schedule that appointment with a provider, we follow up with members after that first session or a few weeks later, to make sure it's the right fit. And that level of care, it makes a gigantic difference.
It really does. It helped me feel supported in this, even though the care was for my son. It's stressful as a parent, and knowing that I had someone checking in with me to make sure we had everything we needed, and things were going as we had hoped, really, really helped me feel supported through my own journey.
That's cool. And you know, the EAP field, it really started, well, not started, but one of the trends is that clinicians would do operational work and then move into account management and sales and marketing and these other roles that really aren't their formal education, but the EAP field has always been kind of so encapsulated. So I love when individuals like yourself come from the outside and have that outside perspective because, like I said, I sat in the EAP bubble for years, not knowing there was a different way to do it or even thinking that through. So to have kind of fresh eyes come in and be able to say, ask those questions. Why do we do it this way? Or have we thought about doing it a different way? I think it just goes into how much new life needs to be, breathed into this industry. So I'm excited for you to continue to learn more, uh, to help us look at where we can be best in class.
Thanks, Mark. I'm really excited too. This has been, the 3 years I've been with CCA has been really incredible. But, as I'm in this new role, I am learning even more and really getting a deep understanding of what makes us different and how unique it is, how unique our service is, and that it isn't this, it's above and beyond the standard.
It really
And
is. Yeah.
um, I feel really proud to be doing the work we're doing.
Well, let me wrap up with this final question for our listeners, because a lot of our listeners are brokers and account contacts. And so, why don't you just tell us a little bit about what it's going to be like working with you? What type of business sales professional are you, and what are the things you really focus on?
Great question, Mark. As a salesperson, I am focused on responsiveness and valuing your time. So my responses are going to be concise and succinct. And also, I'm not afraid to say that I don't have the answer, but I will find you the answer and I'll get it to you as quickly as possible.
And I love that, especially that last part, because whenever you start a new job, especially in a new industry, there's almost this feeling of, oh, I should know it all, or I'm not going to be seen as an expert. But when we're talking about building relationships, ongoing relationships, I think that vulnerability needs to be there, saying, hey, I don't know, but I'm going to find out for you. I'm not going to stop until I find out for you. This is a much more personable relationship based approach, which I know is your style. So I have greatly enjoyed our conversation today. I think our listeners now get a better understanding of what it's going to be like working with you. So excited for you to join the team, especially with your passion around, I want to make sure everyone has that, best in class, top notch EAP experience, because it does make so much difference. So thank you for everything you're doing. And thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Mark. It was a pleasure.
All right, everybody. Well, until we speak again, take care and be well.